Hello and welcome back to the Reprobate Podcast. My name's David Flint and today I'm talking to Rat Scabies, former drummer of The Damned, punk rock pioneer and hunter of the Holy Grail. Okay, so Rat, how are you doing?
Pretty good, actually. All things considered, it's I'm still sort of doing bits and pieces and things like that. Lockdown isn't really affecting me as much as it is most other musicians, because a lot of what I do is, I'm not on the road, so I'm either in the studio or working at home or, with small groups of people shooting videos and the like. So I haven't had such a bad time with it.
Yeah, and you've been recording remotely anyway, haven't you?
Yeah. Mind you, I have, but to be honest, that's pretty much the way it's done these days.
Yeah.
It's all, it's just such a fast process. I can do it, have a recording session for Professor and the Madman in the afternoon, and by the time I get home, they've received the files and they're checking out what I've done.
Mm.
It's just, it really has made the world a much smaller place.
Yeah, but it must be quite a different experience, I suppose, than...
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's, it sounds like I'm, the loneliness of the long-distance drummer.
Yeah.
Because, you don't have a band there kind of vibing you up and going, oh, yeah, that one was okay, try it a bit again like that, and so you don't have that sort of camaraderie and a couple of beers, it's a much more work-intense process, because it is, generally speaking, just me and the engineer.
Yeah.
So, but I'm very lucky, I work with some really good engineers that kind of, should we say, have an empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they become almost a pseudo band, or pseudo bandmates.
Well, yeah, and it's like most things. You have to have people that you can get on with and have a real working relationship with. One where they're not just going to kind of, where they actually care about what the end product and what comes out.
Yeah.
Which is, sometimes people just do it and they're not particularly into the music or what you're doing, so they have a different kind of perspective on it. So finding people that kind of have a 40-year-old attitude to recording songs,
yeah,
not always easy to find.
So tell us about Professor and the Madman, how this came about.
I just happened to meet them when I was out in California at a bad pullover party, and I just met them and jammed with them a bit, and then they invited me around to Alfie's place the following day to just go kind of hang out, and I ended up playing on a track of theirs, and that just sort of started the whole process.
I mean, is it easy moving in when the project is already going? I mean, did you just feel like it was something you fitted into?
Yeah, they were all already writing material and had tunes together and everything. They just kind of, I suppose they were just looking for the right combination of, of elements to finish the tunes off, and sort of in a way that they liked. And again, their sort of favourite musical period was the sort of 80s, when the Damned had the, the Strawberries line up. And so for them, I think they, to be honest, I think they were a bit, I'll listen to him on records, let's get him on ours. And I think originally we only sort of expected to be a couple of 3 tracks and a kind of a guest thing, but actually as time went on, it just sort of, every time I recorded for them, it just seemed to work, and they seemed, pretty happy with what I'd done. And so, the sort of next logical step to complete their nostalgic slice of the Damned was to get Paul in to play bass as well, which worked out really good. I'm pleased they did it.
I've had a couple of press releases about stuff that you've been doing recently. You were doing a remix of a Robert Calvert track as well.
Yeah, I did. Lord of the Hornets.
Yeah, so how did that come about?
Well, I'm quite buddied with the label in America, Cleopatra Records.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the few times I actually asked for the job, because I saw a thing that they were putting together an album of Calvert remixes. So I just got onto them and said, you know, Bob and I used to knock about together a bit, and we sort of were quite friendly. So I sort of thought, well, it'd be nice, you know, to sort of, I don't know, just remix one of his tracks.
Yeah.
And to work with him again, that was kind of in a sort of slightly macabre way. It's a bit strange, but it was one of those things, you know, when the files turned up, you know, when they recorded it, they pretty much did everything directly as it was. So all of the effects and all of the kind of tweaky synth noises and the drum machines were already on there exactly as they were. So I didn't really have many choices. I could either just try and polish up what had already been done and already been heard, or I thought I can try and do something different with it and put kind of like, I thought it'd be quite interesting, to make it sound like a band playing the song.
Yeah.
Whereas the original was very much a studio production. And
yeah.
So I got live musicians in. I got Billy Shinbone to drop some guitars on it, and Chris Constantin to play some bass. And so I just kind of, I don't know, just, it was funny because it didn't really matter what I did. Bob's vocals sort of stood out alone exactly as they were, and just sort of a quality act. You know, you just kind of got the feeling that Bob had his way of delivering a tune, and that was, you know, more than good enough. So it sounded, you know, initially it seemed to be quite a daunting task to, you know, kind of replace everything and redo it and still do the song justice and do Bob justice.
Yeah.
But I think as it went on, it was because of his vocal style and his technique and everything, it was actually a lot easier to do, because the way he sang that song, it could have, you know, you could have put a symphony, a string quartet behind it, and it would have still sounded pretty good, you know.
Yeah, and you know, those albums were just fantastic back in the day.
Yeah, they were, and it was very much a snapshot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think that was, you know, I felt pretty good about being able to refresh it. I don't know. I was very nervous about what Bob Calvert fans would say to the way I treated it, because it was so, you know, sort of removed from the original. But yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say, I guess they are quite a purist bunch.
Yeah, you know, and you get very used to the way a thing is, and you know how it sounds. You know, it's like people have been listening to that track recorded that way for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So they have to, you know, you have to kind of be able to bring something and make it a bit fresher, so there's, without interfering with what the song was, you know.
Yeah.
But I hope I did it. Nobody's threatened to, you know, have me deported to Mars or anything.
No, I think it sounds great. I mean, it's, you know, I think it's a very good, sympathetic version of the originals. You know, it's obviously coming from a place of love as well, which is always good.
Yeah, you know, because I played with Bob a bit, and we did a couple of things, and, you know, hung out. And I think it was a shame, really, because he just got fed up with living in London and decided to go back down to Kent. So it sort of slowed everything down between us a bit. And then, of course, he suddenly died. So I always felt a little bit, you know, as though I'd missed out there by not doing more with him. I mean, this was a small way of doing, you know, making that better.
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about outside of the music is obviously I guess we're something that we have a shared fascination with, but I think you know a great deal more than I do. It's like the whole British folklore in general, and obviously your particular fascination with the Holy Grail.
Oh, right.
So,
Oh, that.
Which I don't know. I mean, is that one of those things that you've kind of exhausted at this stage, or?
Well, I wouldn't say exhausted, because it'll always be fascinating. It's, I sort of currently, my way of feeling about the whole Grail issue is really that it's about the journey. Because all of the Chrétien de Troyes and every version of it, actually, it's not about finding or doing. It's about going from A to B, and the way that kind of makes you grow up, I suppose, and the way you learn from your experiences while you're on that sort of journey, whatever journey it may be. It might just be, going to the shops, or it might be trawling across Europe on a horse, rescuing maidens. But whichever one it is, it's about I suppose, I think, the life experience that you gain, and feeling good about yourself and the decisions you make is probably, I think that's as close to as a Grail as I'll ever get.
So it's almost like it becomes a metaphor for life. You're just finding out about yourself rather than finding anything else.
I think so. And the lessons it kind of teaches is not necessarily to be afraid of things we don't understand. And that there are lots of people out there all with different ideas, attitudes and philosophies, and you mustn't be afraid of those things, just because they're not what you're used to. But it's such a big subject.
Yeah.
You could go on forever.
And I was kind of curious because I saw that you were making a documentary about British folklore for TV, I think.
Well, I did some pilots. We didn't really get very far with it in terms of going into production with a company or anything like that.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people were quite surprised when the Rat Scabies and the Holy Grail book came out.
Yeah.
Because I don't think many people really expected that. And it was just around the time as the Da Vinci Code was breaking. And I think a lot of people certainly a fair amount of media people thought, there's a kind of punk out of water. Yeah. And this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in, and perhaps he'd be a good bloke to tell us about it. So, I don't know, yeah. But I guess it wasn't.
Because I suppose the book is, it's quite a light-hearted look at, your search for the Grail, isn't it? It's not. So it's probably easy for people to see that as not a very serious thing.
Well, here's the truth about the book is that when we started writing it, I said that, first of all, everything in it had to be as accurate as it was known at the time. So there's nothing in it that is kind of made up or invented. And our dates for the historical events and the characters and the places and all of the factual stuff is absolutely bang on, we made a very specific point of doing it. But the other thing I insisted on was that it would be very readable and accessible. Yeah. Because you had, up to that point, the sort of the lightest bit of reading you could get on that mystery was, the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. Yeah. Which was quite a battle to read from beginning to end, I have to say. Yeah, I've tried and failed. Yeah, didn't we all? So I said that was part of the thing, was that it had to make it accessible, to people that weren't necessarily interested in history in such a kind of, I don't know what you call it, not pedantic, but, in such a sort of fine detail, which doesn't make for a good read. I always think I learned more from reading Flashman books about English Victorian history than I ever did at school.
Yeah.
You know, because you're being entertained and you're absorbing those things, you know, and if the writer takes the responsibility of having it factually correct, then that's, you know, that's a great way to learn. It's so much better than just sitting there being bored to death with numbers and names and dates.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the people who write some of those books forget, that not everybody is a historian. Not everybody's going to be able to take in all that intense, minute detail, because it just blurs after a while into numbers and words, as you say.
Yeah, and unless you're actually learning every single piece of information for a greater purpose, then actually, you know, well, my mind just shuts off and says, yeah, you know, don't put that down and come back to it again a bit later when you're in that mood again.
But also, I mean, the Holy Blood and Holy Grail, and obviously the Da Vinci Code, which is, I guess, what we call the pop fiction version of that.
Yeah.
You know, they're very much part of that whole conspiracy theory thing, which we're now kind of, I don't know, balls deep in, aren't we? in the world.
Yeah, and understandably so. I mean, it was, you know, the shadowy world of secret societies, and it's you know, it is virtually impossible to crack unless you're one of them.
Yeah.
But you can observe quite a lot of things. But it was very interesting because while we were writing the book, the Knights Templar, when we started the book, they were non-existent. There weren't any.
Yeah.
You know, and full stop. There just wasn't. And then one day they suddenly revealed themselves and decided that they were going to become public with the fact that they did exist, and there are orders all over the world, and they're a very real thing. And we were kind of in the right place at the right time, I guess, when they decided to do that. And consequently, we got, you know, I got to know quite a few Templars and a few minute details about how secret societies work. And, you know, there's the Masons will tell you, which is the stance for most of us, that they're not so much a secret society as a society with secrets.
Yeah, and I suppose that's it's a fine line, but it's quite a significant one.
Well, yeah, and I mean, to be quite honest, from what I've seen, the mostly it kind of goes that most, you know, most Templar and Masonic secrets were what were retrieved from the Middle East during the Crusades, at the start of the Crusades. And it was knowledge, it was mathematics, it was geometry, it was language. And I think, you know, the Masonic side of it came as that they were the only people that really had the ability to put that knowledge into a literal existence, you know, like building, like the Flying Buttress, building cathedrals, buildings over 2 stories high, you know. And so I think it was pretty much that the Templars held the secrets and then brought them back with them, and the Masons were the people that then, you know, made them a reality and built them. And because of that, I find that today I'm not really sure what kind of secrets they hold apart from conspirational ones. But I really, you know, it's, by way to explain it, you know, I go up to Rosslyn Chapel, for example, which is in a terrible state of kind of disrepair on many levels. There's always complaints, no matter how many tourists they get, there's always complaints they never have enough money.
Right.
And when you look at it, and the same thing with Rennes Chateau and the church there, exactly the same scenario. Everyone complains they don't make enough money, they can't keep it together. And I'm like, well, if you guys are the secret rulers of the world and you can't even keep a couple of dodgy old churches in one piece, it doesn't really say a lot for your, you know, for the power that you wield. Having said that, I'm probably now on a hit list for the Templars or something.
But I mean, isn't that the case with so many of these claims about all-powerful secret societies, that you think, well, first of all, they can't be that super secret and all powerful if everybody seems to know about them? And secondly, they don't seem to really be able to do very much with their power.
Well, not in a noticeable way. I think you do have groups of people today, like the Bilderbergs and the like,
Yeah.
who are, from what you can see of the Bilderberg group, is that pretty much they're high-powered politicians, industrialists and financiers that do decide what's going to be happening in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Certainly on an economic, political, and if you like, technological level.
Yeah.
As to what we can find out about. I find the Bilderberg, actually on the outside seems incredibly sinister to me, and very unfair.
Yeah, I mean, it's powerful elites ruling over everybody else, isn't it? I mean, that's literally what those guys are.
Well, if that's what they're doing, then yeah, but they're obviously talking about something after dinner. Initially, I used to think it was just because like minds always seek out like musicians always hang out with other musicians and stuff, and it's people tend to move in the circles that they work in. It's not on a more social level. So you just have to think when those guys get together, then there's something that must be being talked about after dinner about what have you got coming up next, Mr. Putin? Well, Don, I'll tell you, we're gonna unveil our new space program.
Yeah, I think that's the strange thing about it, that it's just that whole sense of deals being done privately, as you say, over dinner, over cigars, that people get concerned about, because obviously, we'd much prefer all that kind of thing to be out in the open.
Well,
even if it's innocent, it should still be out in the open.
Well, and that is the point, is that because it's, you see, I think there's a lot of devil in deep blue sea here. And if we look at what's going on around us today with COVID, I mean, the first thing is, if you're open and transparent and tell everybody what you intend to do, then just as many people will disagree with you.
Yeah, of course.
As agree with you. So if you keep it a secret, it becomes a conspiracy, but it does mean that your plan will be executed, better or worse.
Yeah.
And it's a lot less flack, I suppose, from the public for behaving in such an undemocratic way. But that's, I mean, when you think of COVID at the moment, it's like I haven't got a clue what's in place in terms of how many meters away from somebody should I stand? Can my next door neighbour come round for a cup of tea?
Yeah.
And all of that, because it seems to change daily, and it seems to depend on who your news source is as to what those rules are.
Yeah.
And so it's very, devil in deep blue sea, because on the one hand, every time anybody has an idea, the other side, it's their job to disagree with it. And then, and nobody really seems to be able to sit everybody down and say, do that. I think what we really need to do is listen to scientists a lot more.
Yeah.
We need to get rid of the politicians and get in people that genuinely understand how the planet works.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think the COVID situation has been strange. I was having this conversation with somebody else a couple of days ago, that when all this first started, I thought that maybe being locked down and having this greater outside threat might make everybody refocus themselves and see the bigger picture. But in fact, it just seems that everybody's just gone further to their particular extreme of, whether it's the right, the left, whatever it is. They've just dug down and become more intense in what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many wrong elements, and the fact that this is a global thing, which is really quite frightening. But you talk about Bilderberg groups and secret plans and doctrines, you know. I mean, there was actually a part of me that said, this is going to be much better for the planet for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Not having cars and industrial, you know, waste, etc., aeroplanes, all of those things, you know, and I quite liked hearing the birds singing. So there was also a part of my conspiracy mind that said, wouldn't it be great if actually that was what the Bilderberg actually listened to somebody that knew what they were doing and said, you know what, guys, we need to shut things down for a few months because otherwise we're all going to be dead in 2 years. So I, you know, that's the sort of optimistic, cheerful side.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting, the idea that we could just be almost forced into a reboot.
Yeah, because, you know, our secret society is always evil. You know, in James Bond films they are. But I mean, look at Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a Bond villain if ever I saw one.
Yeah, literally flying up into space to do God knows what.
Well, yeah. I mean, and in a way, you kind of, you know, you want him to be Superman, don't you? You want him to be the guy that has got the power and the influence to be able to do things for the public good.
Yeah, because you think, have we been doing things so well in recent years anyway? Maybe what we need is somebody to come in and take charge and reshake it up.
Well, yeah, there you go. Now you're back to Germany in 1930.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with that, that particular argument.
I mean, that's the sad thing is you need the problem is, you know, when you use a word like socialist or communism, you know, people automatically, because those words were poached by, you know, the bad guys, if you like.
Yeah.
But actually the principles are very good. They're everything for the population, you know, and it should all be nice and fair and equal. Like I suppose they do in Scandinavia. You know, they have this kind of way of thinking in Sweden, don't they? It's that nothing should be really great, nothing should be really shit, but everything should just be a sort of kind of functional but easy to use mediocre.
But that's probably why Sweden's, you know, seemingly done better than most places in terms of the whole COVID situation.
Well, it's an interesting observation, isn't it, that they have done better than we have. They seem to have done anyway. You know. But then again, it is a much smaller population. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are lots of ways around that. I mean, has COVID, I mean, other than the actual lockdown, I mean, how has COVID kind of affected you in terms of work or in terms of just yourself, I guess?
It's funny because my physical thing is probably a lot less because I really didn't do what I should have done and gone out for long walks every day and exercised and did all that sort of thing. Yeah, me too. So I'm starting to feel that a bit now of like, oh God, I've got to get back into shape, and I really don't want to because I'm used to sitting on the chair all day.
It's weird how it becomes really easy and really normal.
Yeah, and you know, the biggest decision I have to make, you know, really is which chair should I go to? Should I go in the living room? Should I go out in the pool? Should I, you know? Yeah, no. So it's I think motivation is my next big issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have that similar thing that you just become. It's the new normal, isn't it? You know, you become used to the way you're living, and everything in the past seems like it's a long, long time ago.
Yeah, isn't it? But no, you know, like I say, I liked the fact there weren't cars and there weren't aeroplanes.
Yeah,
a lot more birds, a lot more nature. It was much cleaner. The skies were so clear. You know, it was. You look out of the window and it'd be the air count's good. You know, and I live near Heathrow.
Yeah,
usually it isn't.
But I think that's one of the interesting things that, you know, there are positives that we can take from this whole situation, whether it's the climate, whether it's just human interaction, people washing their hands more, which I don't think is a bad thing.
I did that at the beginning, and then my hand, I mean, it was kind of like every time I touched anything, I washed my hands. And like after a week, I just started getting them with rashes. And
Yeah, that's the downside.
you kind of have to think, well, no. It's,
Yeah. I think everybody had that thing of, this initial hysteria, and then eventually you've just got to settle down a little bit, or you just can't function.
Well, yeah, and you have to adapt. And I think that's one of the great things about human species, is that what we do best is adapt. And it's just very interesting how quickly we sort of adapted to it.
Mm.
And I don't necessarily mean just by people staying indoors and not going out and doing those things, but how quickly they adapted to either, well, I don't believe this is a real thing, or I don't believe I'm at risk.
Yeah.
Into the, no, please stay away from me because I'm very afraid. I think, both sides adapted incredibly quickly to that.
Yeah, and I think it's that weird thing that people will almost shift positions, but they'll do that early on. I think when it first broke, I was very kind of blasé about it for a little while, and then all of a sudden, I think within a week, my whole mindset had shifted.
Yeah.
But then I think it's kind of stayed fairly put since then. But you see equally people just pushing themselves further and further, as I said, further and further into their own beliefs, whether they think that it's the end of the world or whether they think it's all a conspiracy that's been, it's a hoax.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's what I was saying earlier, everything's got an alternative view.
Mm.
And so it doesn't really matter what the truth is. It's what people believe. That's the important thing. And, does the lockdown, I mean, I guess the music industry has changed so much over the last 20 years anyway. So the whole idea of shops being closed is probably no longer that important in terms of sales. Well, it is actually, because the way the industry used to work was that you would make a record, then you would get DJs to play it, hopefully between 7 and 9 in the morning while people are on the way to work.
Yeah.
And then between 4 and 6 when people are on the way home from work. And you would have the average guy, the average music fan would stop off at the record store on a Friday when they got paid, and hopefully they'd see your album in the shop and they would have heard it on the radio and they think, I'll buy that. So that whole passing and curiosity market has disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to get noticed now.
Yeah, because there's so much stuff out there.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody's very good at social media, and everybody's, and some people have got a lot more money to play with than others. And I think from that emerges really what was always the alternative music scene, which was, you won't hear this during the day on the radio, but there's a discerning group of music lovers out there that seems, I think, the way the industry's developed has grown. The thing that whereas they're much more aware of things that aren't the mainstream.
Yeah.
I think that there's, I think the Facebooks of this world and the group chats, because that word of mouth thing has always been very, very important for bands. But now it's kind of, instead of a group of 6 friends talking in a pub about a band or an album they'd heard or whatever, it's now become 6,000. Where somebody would say, I just got this record, and they'll put up a link and then 6,000 people can check it out. That can't be bad, but it doesn't compare to the 60,000 that, a mainstream acts like, I know Lucy King or something, probably 600,000 in the case of her. But I think the discerning music lovers, I think the hardcore of that is much more solid and much more available now than it was before.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people have split much more into niche groups in that sense. Although obviously, I think the music scene is now seems to be a lot more fluid than it used to be. Certainly, I think when you look at when the Damned started, everything was very tribal, wasn't it? You were into punk, you were into metal, you couldn't be into both. You kind of had to hate each other.
Yeah, exactly. I think that sort of changed in the last, I don't know, sort of 15 years, I guess. Now, there was that whole kind of super new rave thing that happened. And I was involved with some of the people that were kind of instrumental in that. And the thing with that was they threw away all the tribal thing. They really did just judge a record as to whether it was a good record or not. Yeah. And whether it was a good tune. It's like that. That scene. They'd have you play Bee Gees track and then the Buzzcocks. Yeah. And which is something, as you're saying, you're really metal or punk or disco, and so that would never ever have happened. But that, I think, opened it up a lot more. I think something happened to the sort of collective consciousness. I think the genre thing suddenly got thrown out of the window. And I suppose it's much more about self. Yeah. So it's less about what you're wearing and just more about what you like. Well, yeah, but I mean, what you were wearing was a big statement as well. Yeah, evening gowns and trainers. Obviously, it's a lot of fun. Well, yeah, that's an interesting look. Yeah, but I think it, and to a degree, quite narcissistic, which then again, every youth culture is that. Yeah. So it's fair game, but I think that sort of period opened up a lot of doors for a lot of different types of things to become acceptable, which previously just wouldn't have been because you were in the wrong tribe. Yeah, and I guess also things have now become almost like heritage music, hasn't it? I mean, it must feel, I don't know, does it feel strange that you're kind of part of a great historical movement? Yeah, it does. Because punk was always like the initial cry of punk was that it was like a year zero thing, because everybody who'd been going for 10 years was a dinosaur, and now we're looking at 50 years, 40 years. Well, and that's the amazing thing, is that it was never ever meant to have any sustainability. It was never meant to be preserved. It was never meant to be something that was held up as an example to the world of how to behave. It was totally the opposite, and for some reason it still exists, and I'm not sure I really understand why. I think part of it is because I think it was very good to kind of, if you're trying to learn how to play a guitar, it's much easier to learn how to play a Ramones song than it is, say, I don't know, I don't know, something with a lot more guitar. You're not going to be listening to, if you try and play along with Jeff Beck when you're just learning, it's hard. If you play along with the Ramones, you can do it. And I think there's a great sense of achievement with that comes with that. And I think that's one of the things that encourage it. And also, punk, I suppose it's a lot of fun to look back on. When I see the old clips from 76, it's kind of like, I can't believe that anybody ever took it seriously enough to do the things that they did. Just getting stopped by the police, getting chased by teddy boys, being seen as absolute social outcasts. I remember with the band, we staying in a hotel, and they just, we were paying the same price for the room as everybody else, but they wouldn't let us into the restaurant to eat lunch or have breakfast. And even the BBC, when we did our first John Film session, it made us wait until the lunch break was over and the canteen was empty before we could go and eat. And it was, boy, you're supposed to be grown-ups. It's kind of weird, because I think you can tell people that now, and you look at everything that's out there now, it's very hard to understand that sheer level of
hysteria and terror and panic about what people thought punks were and were going to do.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because of that, you could see the fear in people's eyes. Because of a haircut and a leather jacket. It was,
Well, there's probably nothing more appealing to a kid than wanting to be an outcast and a threat to society.
Yeah, especially when your mates start to join them in.
Yeah.
When you go from being the only one in the village to being, well, we're all at this now. It's, yeah, it was good while it lasted. And it still lasts, I think, because the good in it survives.
Yeah, I think bands, whether it's The Damned, whether it's, lots of other bands, obviously, like any other band, you move forward, you change direction, you evolve without necessarily having to lose what you were about in the first place. But there's no reason why there should be a kind of finite lifespan to any of that stuff, is there?
No. Well, as a player, a musician, I didn't learn to play the drums so I could play the same song over and over and over. I did it because what's really exciting about being a musician is when you learn, because you surprise yourself and impress yourself. And it's a great feeling, when you do something that you never thought you could do, or you just didn't know how to. So that's kind of why you do it.
Yeah.
I never did it to be sort of stuck in a rut of just playing the same, same songs over and over.
No, and I guess that's the frustrating thing sometimes, that, you'll always get that little group of fans who expect you just to stay doing exactly the same thing for the rest of your life.
Well, the Damned were also quite nihilistic in that we were sort of quite bored quite easily, and we all had that thing about wanting to progress and move on and to do something that wasn't what we'd already done. We didn't want to just keep on making the same records over and over. So for us, it was a bit of a journey, really, suddenly going, well, you know what, we did that sort of piano schmoozy intro to Melody Lee on the last album, and nobody really complained about it. And, we then realised that we could actually stretch into other musical areas without losing our audience.
Yeah.
I always talk about Curtain Call, because when we made it, I mean, we thought it was brilliant, but we also thought it was going to be commercial suicide, because we weren't at all sure that the average Damned fan would take to something that was sort of virtually prog rock.
Yeah.
But I think that was the other thing with the Damned and its audience, was that our audience were sort of moving at our same pace. And I think the bulk of them would have been disappointed if we'd have just remade the same record. I think that was part of liking the Damned, was that you never really knew what was going to happen next.
No, I agree. I think that's it's the best way to be, really, isn't it? Don't be predictable. Follow, and also it's not just being predictable, I suppose, but it's also that thing of, be honest to yourself. So don't just keep on doing the same old thing because that's what people will be happy with.
Well, yeah. I mean, we only ever made records that we liked. We never really thought about, well, once we were in the studio, we were in our own world. That was what it was. And then anything that worked and sounded good was fair game, regardless of whose idea it may have been. The Damned always, I think, generally saw itself as a sum total parts, rather than it being, like there's some situations where, one of the band is the main writer.
Yeah.
And that's kind of okay, but that wasn't ever really the case for the Damned. I think we've never had that much material lying around, so we didn't have a sort of prolific thing going on, but we all kind of came up with tunes a lot of the time. So we were never really starved, but we never really had a surplus. So I think, that was part of the reason why we sounded like we did, because it wasn't a dominant force. Everybody had things going on that were then contributed towards the damned album.
Yeah, and I think it was, it's always been a band that you can identify no matter what point. You still sounds like the Damned. That's what I mean.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll never know how we do that. Where we did that. But I suppose it comes with the way you do something, as opposed to how you do.
Yeah, because you're still the same people, even if you've got older and your tastes have changed or whatever. But it's still generally the same group of people.
And you keep the same principles, even though your taste in music varies, gets broad or whatever. Whereas you would have maybe been influenced by the Kinks in the early 70s. It's like it's. If you're listening to, say, I don't know, Mozart or Bach, it's just as easy to take Bach as the same kind of influence as you did from the Kings. It's just sort of, it's a mindset of them kind of turns you on, I suppose.
And I mean, was it at all liberating when you kind of no longer had to have that kind of mentality that all the old hippie stuff from the past was dreadful and verboten and not allowed, and you could actually acknowledge people like Calvert and...
Yeah. What do you mean? What? Just kind of...
Well, I guess I'm thinking obviously the height of punk. You obviously with the Pistols and the I Hate Pink Floyd stuff and the prog rock and psychedelia and all that hippie stuff was just the worst thing imaginable.
Well, yeah, I guess it was. I mean, it's. I never listened to more than 21st Century Schizoid Man on that King Crimson.
No, well,
I never made it to the end of track 2, let alone side 2, because actually that one track had done enough.
Yeah.
But what we also found was that the kind of the brighter ones of the previous generation, like Bob Calvert, Old Coxon, and Robert Fripp, they weren't afraid of what we were.
No.
And most of the kind of petty jealousies that came out in the sort of minor spitefulness was mostly from bands that were seeing the pub scene disappear from under them. And there was a lot of mediocre pub rock bands. I mean, people talk about pub rock, they always make me think like, Dr. Feelgood and Heavy Metal Kid, all the good ones. Actually, there was a lot of old shit out there as well.
Yeah. Like with anything.
Yeah. But, you got someone like Dr. Feelgood, Lee Brillo, he was always, in fact, I got to know him pretty well. And he turned me on to real blues, actually. But like I say, they weren't really afraid of what we were because they were kind of confident in what they were. And, the I Hate Pink Floyd, etc. was kind of, Pink Floyd were fair game, to be honest.
Yeah, and it was probably a necessary slogan to separate you out.
Well, yeah.
As a movement.
And as it's more a statement to your audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but it's funny because today, I'll sort of say, well, yeah, I didn't really mind Dark Side as a movie. Because I'd have been 100 quarters saying that in that.
Yeah. So what? Obviously, you've got the new album. It's coming out in November, is it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for you after this?
I've been doing some more stuff with the Sinclairs.
Right.
We've just shot our Halloween video with, which, because we're an instrumental band, but we decided that for our novelty Halloween single we were going to get a guest singer. So we got Paul Ronnie Angel from Urban Voodoo Machine to sing it.
All right.
So we just shot the video for that yesterday, and we think it's going to be a download release on the 30th. Is when we're going to officially release it. So I've just done that, and then Sinclair's again. We're going to do a Christmas single. After that, we're determined to call us something in the market that's seasonal.
All the holidays.
Part of the pension plan, yeah. You know, yes. So I'm doing that, and you know, I've got a few other things on the go. 69 Cats. I'm not sure where they say they're from, really. The guitar player lives in Austin, and the singers in Helsinki. That's another long distance one, but that album's coming out in the next month or so. So I'm pretty busy.
All right, well, good stuff. We'll look forward to hearing it. All right, well, cheers, sir.
All right, David.
All right, thank you very much, Rat.
Take it easy.
You too. Okay.
Cheers.